And now, just to read some of the emails, because you've been getting in touch with your thoughts, gbviews@gbnews.com. We were talking about whether you would police your borders. David says, I would like to invent a border force that actually protected our borders. Graham says, I believe so many of us could do a better job than the job the Border Force Police are currently doing. I would volunteer. Joe says, we seem to have practically open borders at the moment, and I'm fed up of it, so I would indeed volunteer to police our borders. You see, they say they can't recruit anybody. Well, that's three of you right here. Mark says, I think policing our borders is far more complex than we make it out to be, but I would not volunteer to police our borders. Yeah, 3 out of 4 ain't bad. Well, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, would you volunteer to police our borders? Former Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick believes the French should deploy Texas-style blockades into the shallow waters off the coast of northern France to help prevent smugglers getting off boats into the sea. But could this be enough to help stop the boats? Now, many have crossed this year, lots as we know, and we could go further in this country and deploy potentially volunteers to police them. What do you think? Is that actually possible? So for the Great British Debate this hour, I thought I'd ask you whether you would be up for volunteering to do just that. Well, joining me to discuss, former Border Force Chief Kevin Saunders, the leader of UKIP, Neil Hamilton, and also former advisor to Michael Gove, Charlie Rowley. All right, well, I'm going to start with you, Kevin. Is that even a possibility that you could have, as we have volunteer police forces, volunteer army recruits, we have a territorial army, they're volunteers. Could we not have something for Border Force?
No, you couldn't. Border Force job, working on the passenger arrival control, is a very specialist and very difficult job to do. You have to be able to talk to people. You have to be able to deal with people that are unhappy. You ideally would be able to have another language in your pocket. There's all sorts of things that you'd have to be able to do to make a good Border Force IO.
But I've ticked all three. So, you know what I mean? I can speak another language, I can deal with people, I can talk to people. I'm thinking, why are they not considering something where they train? Can you not train some of the people who they're saying are idle, sitting at home, doing nothing that they want to? Can we not have some sort of volunteer Border Force idea? Is that not? I'll come to Charlie Rowley. I'll come back to you, Kevin. Charlie.
Yes, you absolutely could. And I don't see why not, because as you said earlier on, Nana, you have volunteer police, you have the Army Reserve. You don't actually necessarily need to be the one dealing with an issue, but if you are a volunteer and you spot something, you can alert the correct authorities anyway to come to your aid and assistance. It's the public in general policing themselves. You know, the members of the public spot crime all the time. They call the police and the police come down and deal with that nitty-gritty side, the actual enforcement side, like you need to see from a proper border enforced officer. But you can certainly have a voluntary arm to that. And I was just in the gym downstairs at this very studio now, sort of making sure that if I were called up, I mean, it would be very desperate times, but, you know, I would do all that I could to protect our borders if that was needed.
Yeah, I mean, I would sign up to a volunteer Border Force and give 1 day a week or something to go and train and practice, and I quite enjoy it. Neil Hamilton.
Yeah, well, like you, Nana, I tick 3 boxes too, and I'd be very happy to be in the Border Force, or indeed on the Channel Coast with my pitchfork as a kind of dad's army of manning our borders.
No pitchforks, no pitchforks.
But I think that, you know, this is something we should consider more widely. I mean, Switzerland has a citizen army, for example. We know how under-resourced our armed forces are generally, just like the Border Force. So what we want to do is create a much greater sense of civic duty amongst our population by giving them a chance to do, in a voluntary or kind of reserve capacity, many of the jobs which we can't get full-time equivalents for.
See, Kevin? So, Kevin, we've all said we can do the 3 things that you said. It's quite complex, we know. We could do something that's maybe supporting those on the front line in some way. But why is it such an impossible task, or not something that could be considered?
Let me try and explain.
OK.
We've used police officers, retired police officers and current MOD police officers to fill gaps at high days and holidays on the border control. But while they're terribly good people, and they're certainly the police officers are very good at talking to people, they just do not have the in-depth knowledge to deal with anybody other than British citizens. I mean, how would you land an Argentinian, for example? What would you do with a German national with no ID card? You know, these are things that you come across all the time. And you can't sit at a desk and put your hand up and call an immigration officer over and say, look, I've got this problem, because all you would be doing is having immigration officers basically doing the job full time. And how would you pick a forgery? What would you look at, for example, in an Italian residency card to see whether it was forged or not?
Well, Neil's shaking his head there. I think we can all learn those things. But Neil, what do you think? I don't see why I couldn't learn that. Neil?
Yeah, well, that's absolutely right. Of course, people can be trained up to do these jobs. It's not exactly rocket science, is it? Yes, there's no doubt a huge variety of different situations that occur, and you can't necessarily train somebody up for them all right at the start, but you've got to start somewhere. When you recruit people into the border force right at the very beginning, if they're working there full time, they have to learn the job similarly. So I don't see why this can't be done on a part-time basis as well. It seems to me a counsel of despair to say that, because there's difficulties, all too difficult, it would never do anything if we took that view.
Charlie Rowley.
Yeah, so I think we just need to separate the 2 or 3 issues out, because Border Force are responsible for so many different things. And I think the thing that Kevin was talking about in particular is if you're sitting on a desk, if you're letting people into the country, if you're making that decision where people turn up perhaps legally, that is one aspect of it. But you could be a volunteer casual observer on the southeast of South Coast, for example, or the southeast of Kent, for example, just taking part in overnight patrols just as an observer. If you then see illegal crossings, for example, you can then alert the much-needed authorities to then go and intercept the boats or intercept the individuals that might be needed as a volunteer. So I think there are many, many roles that the Border Force obviously do carry out. The much more higher skilled, much more ones that need tougher decisions are going to be people that will be trained and will be qualified. But the lesser roles, where it might just be an observation capacity or one where you could just be a volunteer, I think that's right to involve the public where there is a shortfall in the numbers of people.
Yeah, and I think, I'm a lawyer by profession, and I'd be very happy to put my legal skills at the disposal of the Border Force. I'm perfectly capable of dealing with asylum seekers or others trying to enter the country and interrogate them, cross-examine them on their motives and their qualifications. And there must be lots of people like me who are retired or they've wound down in their profession who are prepared to do that.
Well, very quickly to Kevin, very quickly, your 20 seconds. What are your thoughts on that? We're all willing to learn and do whatever we're capable of doing within it. Why aren't the government potentially offering
well,
that?
If you're that keen, then I would invite you to actually attempt to join Border Force full-time and become very valued members of the team. You can't do it on one day a week. I'm very sorry. Come and join us.
Well, how about volunteers, though? I think you could have a volunteer force. Well, so what do you think, then? Yes or no, then? Would you be prepared to volunteer? Charlie Rowley?
Yes, sign me up. Go on, sign me up. I'll see you tomorrow, Kevin.
Neil Hamilton, would you be prepared to volunteer?
I certainly would, rather.
Yeah, and finally to you, then. What about you, Kevin? Would you?
Would I go back?
Would you, yeah, volunteer?
Would I go back? I doubt very much if they would have me back, to be honest.
Well, they might take you.
Because
They'll take you as a volunteer, Kevin. I'm sure they would. Kevin, thank you very much.
I very much doubt it.
Former Border Force Chief Neil Hamilton, UKIP leader, and also Charlie Rowley. Thank you very much for your thoughts. This is GB News on TV.